A resolution is a public hearing. A resolution approving programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program. We'll start with a roll call. Mr. David?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Councilor Cortez.
Here.
Councilor Fay.
Present.
Councilor McGinnis. Councilor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney. Councilor Winograd. Councilor Zdanowicz. 6 councilors present.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Just to note, there is high school graduation tonight and a couple of other conflicts the councilors had. So we do have a quorum, so we are going to continue. And we'll start with the presentation. Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight's public hearing is an annual hearing we hold to approve programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Tax Credit Program. I'll have our Director of Leisure Services, Helen Rubino-Turco, join us at the podium to give a brief overview of this process. As I said, that routinely takes place every single year. Through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Rubino-Turco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, the Neighborhood Assistance Act program is an annual state tax credit program that encourages businesses to invest in community organizations. Each year, the town invites these local nonprofit groups to propose eligible projects. And then we submit the list of projects to the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services for inclusion in the program. Businesses that make donations towards these approved projects receive state tax credits in return. This year's solicitation resulted in 14 projects from 8 different local nonprofit organizations. And the state requires that the town council hold this public hearing to receive any feedback on these programs. A resolution to approve the list of the programs that are eligible for investment under the provisions of the Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act grant program is on the council's agenda at your meeting this evening. And you are required to vote to approve the list of the town, and then the town manager will submit the NAA application for these programs following the meeting before July 1st.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubino-Turco. This is something we do annually. Many of us that have been around the table have seen this multiple times. It's a great program. Mr. Clerk, we will go to public comment if you're done with presentation. Mr. Clerk, have you received any written comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We're checking on sign-up sheets for this public hearing. And because there's many. And while Mr. Dodge is looking, are there any questions from the council? No one has signed up. Are there any questions from the council? Yes, Ms. Pullen.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. I had thought that there was a limit on nonprofit organizations capping out at $150,000 for their proposals, but it looks like on our list we have some nonprofit organizations receiving more than that. So. Was I just mistaken, or is there some sort of a
I know that it's 150,000 aggregate, but I believe also that they don't know which programs will attract donations. So they have multiple programs that are eligible up to a certain cap, but them as an aggregate is 150,000. Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Okay, so as a follow-up through you, it looks to me like the University of Hartford has 5 projects on this list that total about $600,000. So I'm just a little bit confused about that.
Right, and I think the answer to that question is that they are all eligible projects, but we don't know what businesses will then want to support which projects they'd like to support.
Okay.
There is an audit that is done afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pullen.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. With that, we'll adjourn this public hearing. And Yes, we are 2 minutes in to, so 6:45, we will begin the 6:45 public hearing, ordinance establishing a sustainable West Hartford Commission and ordinance repealing the ordinance establishing the Conservation and Environment Commission. We'll begin with the roll call. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks,
Present.
Mayor Cantor,
Here.
Councilor Fay,
Here.
Councilor McGinnis, Councilor Poland,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney,
Here.
Councilor Winograd, Councilor Zdanowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. We'll begin with the presentation by Town Manager. Mr.
Thank
Weber.
you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this public hearing is to formally create a new Sustainable West Hartford Commission. The council may recall that the idea of combining the Clean Energy Commission and the Conservation and Environment Commission first came up as a recommendation from the Sustainability Advisory Group back in March of 2022. And as a result of those recommendations, our energy specialist, Catherine DeVinny, kicked off a series of meetings that started last June of 2022 to bring together both commissions with the idea of working together as a combined group that would be committed to promoting greater sustainability in West Hartford. The groups met monthly to develop and refine the ordinance that is before you, with the final review completed by our Corporation Counsel's office back in April. This ordinance was presented at the Public Works Facilities and Sustainability Committee meeting in May, where it was recommended to move forward to the council this evening. The new Sustainable West Hartford Commission will be comprised of 11 electors of the town for the purpose of promoting practices that lead to greater environmental, social, and economic sustainability, ensuring a high quality of life for present and future generations by fostering an inclusive, resilient, and thriving community, and encouraging the responsible use and conservation of energy and natural resources. Eligible members shall have interest or experience in the field of environmental, social, or economic sustainability. This particular ordinance will take effect September 1st of 2023. I do want to thank members of our staff, Catherine DeVinny and Cynthia Latour, as well as Bernie Pelletier, who chaired the Clean Energy Commission, and Emily Mooney Scott, who chaired the Conservation and Environment Commission, as well as all the members of both of those commissions who worked hard over the last year to bring us where we are this evening, establishing this new Sustainable West Hartford Commission. I will pause there and turn it back to you, Madam Mayor, for any questions that the council had.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Are there any questions? Well, we'll start with public comment. Mr. Dodge, I would assume that there's, I don't know. And while Mr. Dodge is checking, Mr. Clerk, have you received any comments?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. There's no one signed up. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to this public hearing? No? Okay. So questions or comments from town council? Well, just want to say it's unfortunate that Mr. Winograd couldn't be here for this meeting and this public hearing. He is traveling, but he has, this was under his committee and is very supportive of this idea. This is something actually that we had talked about prior to the pandemic, and it's a model that has worked in many other communities, bringing together one group to have the focus of environmental, economic, and social sustainability and the impact of that. And Sustainable Connecticut has kind of used that format for their rewards program. And this is something that actually will be recognized by the state and keep us in that top tier category. And I also want to thank Catherine DeVinny for her work and leadership on this. This is something that we knew about when we established the Sustainability Advisory Group, that we would probably be in this position. And I want to thank all the members of the Conservation and Clean Energy for their collaboration and support in combining the for the Sustainability Commission. So, okay, with that, any other comments or Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just echo what you just said. I do know the committee as well as Catherine DeVinny and her team, And the volunteers have worked very hard to bring it to the point where we are now. And it shows the commitment on the town as well as us as a body to put our money where our mouth is and to be a leader in this particular area. So I too want to thank everybody who put their time and effort in seeing this through.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Are there any other comments? Okay. Seeing no other comments, questions, one more time. We will adjourn this public hearing, and the next public hearing is scheduled to begin at 7. So we have 7 minutes or so. So enjoy your quiet time.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Counselor Cortez.
Here.
Counselor Fay.
Present.
Counselor McGinnis. Counselor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney. Counselor Winograd. Counselor Zdanowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. I just again to note that it is high school graduation. One of our counselors is at his son's graduation, and other two counselors are traveling for family commitments. So we have a quorum, and so we will continue. And I will through the town manager. We're gonna.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following public hearing is in regards to an ordinance amending residential parking requirements. This ordinance was discussed in two separate Community Planning and Economic Development Committee meetings, the most recent being last month in May. As we discussed in CPED, Public Act 2129 created a number of standards that municipalities' zoning regulations must not be in conflict with, including the establishment of a parking maximum requirement for residential units by bedroom type. The intent of this provision is to limit artificially high parking minimums, which our staff is certainly in support of, as parking surplus can lead to a number of negative impacts, including environmental impacts and loss of tree and vegetative cover, to name a couple. These changes will bring us in line with Public Act 2129. However, it does not prevent us from continuing to explore parking zoning ordinances to continue to minimize parking standards as much as possible, which is also an action item under our plan of conservation and development. At this point, through you, Madam Mayor, I'll turn to our town planner, Mr. Dumais, to provide us with a summary of the changes to this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Madam Mayor, members of the council, just for housekeeping purposes, you should have two referral letters, one from the Town Planning and Zoning Commission and one from the Capital Regional Council of Government, both favorable referrals on the ordinance pending. As the manager said, this ordinance seeks to take our parking standards and make them align with the state requirements. So the state sought to curb artificially high minimums, and they essentially imposed a standard on municipalities that chose to opt into the program to create a maximum minimum that you could require for any residential development. It was by bedroom type. Now, this differed from the way West Hartford regulates parking for residential units. We do so on a 1.5 space per dwelling unit standard, regardless of bedroom type. In the past two instances when this was discussed at CPED, I went through an analysis of the last 10 years of housing and showed you examples of how our standard differs from the state standard and why the approach before you seeks to right-size that and seeks to incentivize the minimum amount of parking to support residential units. And the ordinance does that by allowing for our existing standard to stay in place for 2 or 3 family dwelling units unless a lesser number is required by the state statute. So the state statute says municipality can't impose more than 1 parking space per studio or 1-bedroom unit, or 2 spaces for anything more. So when we did our analysis, we looked, in the past 10 years, we looked at 20 residential developments, and our local ordinance provided for less parking in 14 of those 20 instances. So 6 of them, there was, if we applied the state standard, we would have gotten less parking required. This ordinance seeks to blend the two and provide the flexibility to ensure we're consistent with the state standard, but also not providing or requiring too much parking. Having said that, if we look at the actual amount of parking approved and built, there's a difference. So our standard, and in the 20 projects we analyzed, we looked at 10 of those. The developers in 10 cases proposed more parking than our standards require. 5 of them, they proposed the minimum standard we require. And another 5, through your authority as a special development authority and zoning authority, you allowed for and approved less parking based on actual parking demand. And that's been a trend you've seen and approved of recently, and it's really on a location-specific basis. Throughout the center, you've recently approved many projects that have demonstrated, based on a parking analysis and demand, you can approve and they can support less parking being provided on site. Recently, with the adoption of the Transit-Oriented Development District, you approved a new standard that is really demand-driven. So if any entity in the TOD zone wants to come in and provide less parking, they can use time of day or shared parking methodology. The goal of that is to reduce the amount of parking being built and encourage infill and other reutilization of parking areas. You may have seen a letter come from Bike West Hartford. In that letter, the authors of the letter raise a number of very valid points that are largely echoed in our whereas clause for this ordinance, that minimum parking requirements can suppress economic development. They can increase the cost of housing and suppress housing affordability. They can encourage sprawl. They have negative environmental impacts. As the manager said, this ordinance is a small step just to make us consistent with the statute, and it doesn't preclude or stop us from continuing that positive momentum to right-size our parking standards. The Plan of Conservation and Development offers a number of strategies, both in the economic development sections. I just want to read them on for the record. Something we should consider is the review of our parking zoning ordinances to identify potential areas for modification to modernize the approach to commercial parking requirements. So that's an action item suggested by our POCD. Similarly, in our transportation section, it suggests that we review our zoning ordinances and revise as necessary to support multimodal approach to support transit-oriented, bikeable, walkable, and innovative trends in the transportation field. And to do so, suggests that we review our parking ordinances to meet and modernize those approaches. And then similarly, in our open space and environment goal, there is another action item to review ordinances to encourage and support sustainable development practices. All of these things we certainly can do and should do, and with the manager's direction, I think that planning staff would be excited to work on these in the coming months to take a look, as our POCD outlines, and how we can bring our parking standards into a more modern approach. This ordinance before you is the first step in that process.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dumais. Can you just, you had said if you opt into the program, so how is the state, if you don't opt in, what, I'm just curious on how that works.
There's a public hearing opt-out provision built into the statute whereby a state would have to go through a public hearing process, and I'd have to turn to Corp Counsel to look at the statute, but there is a public hearing, public notice requirement whereby you'd have to make a decision and state why we're opting out of this standard.
Thank you. And there was just one other point that I just wanted to emphasize. As you said, the SDD process allows us the ability to, on a project basis, to reduce the required parking from the town ordinances, and now would be the consistent town state ordinances. Yeah.
Correct.
Great. All right. While we're looking for Mr. Dodge, do you have?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Dallas Dodge Corporation Counsel. Just to follow up on what the town planner said, it's an opt-out provision under state statute. And so if a town wanted to adopt a standard that was a higher parking requirement than state statute, then you would be required to publish a hearing, have a 2/3 vote, and then make certain findings in order to opt out of the lower state program. The reason that the ordinance is drafted the way it is, where it makes reference to sort of our existing ordinance and then also the state statutes, the lesser of which one, was because our ordinance and the state statute basically speak in two different languages. Our ordinance speaks in terms of dwelling units, where the state statute speaks in terms of number of bedrooms that are in the dwelling unit. And so the easiest way to sort of marry the two, because as we went through different analyses of or different scenarios, where there were some instances where under our ordinance you actually might have a lesser parking requirement, and then other instances where under state statute you had a lesser parking requirement. And knowing that the direction that the council wanted to go with this, the easiest way to marry the two was to simply say that in instances where there's a conflict between state statute and our ordinance, that it will be the lesser of those two standards that applies. And so that's why the ordinance is drafted the way it is. And I think there's another important provision here too, which is for builders who come to the town. This is basically a notice provision to them now. whereas they look at our ordinance, that they're sort of put on notice to make sure to go look at the state statute and see if there's a lesser provision in there than what's under ordinance, so that they can make sure that they're not in conflict with that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Dodge. Well, can we look for public comment on people? And Mr. Clerk, have you received any written comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we received a letter from Bike West Hartford, Inc., as well as an email from Kevin McKernan. Both of those correspondence pieces have been uploaded to the agenda packet.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Okay, I have 3 people that have signed up to speak, and if you haven't signed up, we will ask if you want to speak. So the first person, you have 3 minutes to speak. Unless you represent a group, you can speak for 5. But we'll start with Thomas Martin. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Town Councilors. My name is Thomas Martin, and I live at 134 Woodrow Street. I also represent the board of Bike West Hartford, a local nonprofit. Tonight, the Town Council will consider changes to West Hartford's parking requirements. However, I'm here today to respectfully request that the Council eliminate minimum parking requirements altogether. For those unaware, minimum parking requirements are zoning regulations that mandate a certain number of parking spaces be provided for each new development. And there are a number of problems with these requirements. They make it more expensive to build housing, which makes development of affordable housing difficult. They lead to more traffic congestion. When developers are required to build a certain number of parking spaces, they often build more parking than is needed. The surplus of parking induces demand for more trips in a car. These requirements also increase the amount of land dedicated to parking. This land can be used for other purposes such as housing, parks, or businesses. Cities and towns across the United States have increasingly begun to eliminate minimum parking requirements, with much success and commendation. Even the National Parking Association, the leading industry trade group of parking operators, is a supporter. Eliminating minimum parking requirements will not eliminate parking itself. I want to be clear, we need parking. Instead, the elimination of minimum parking requirements would allow our community and developers to make market-based decisions based on supply and demand. Which brings me to the former Yukon campus, a treasured 57 acres in our town where over 50% of the developable land is currently proposed to be parking lots. Our regulations should be flexible enough to allow the developer to think outside the box, to allow for less parking and to allow for a more sustainable development that will benefit each member of our community. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. The next person I have is Raylan Connor, I think. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll speak for Abby Moore as well, who was on the list. So Richard Connor, resident of West Hartford, also a developer doing a project in Windsor and looking to do projects in West Hartford as well. Just wanted to echo from the rest of the group to eliminate minimum parking requirements because it helps spur development in the area, just making it a better community to live in and drive economic growth. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. All right. He said, yeah, well, yeah, your address for the record is 400 Fern. I thought. 490. I'm sorry? 490. 490. Okay, can we just correct that for the record? I'm sorry. It must be my glasses. All right. Any other people that would like to speak that have not signed up? I don't think so because. All right. And questions from the council. Are there any questions from town council? Okay, so as a summary, this ordinance is aligning us with the state standards, their minimum requirements, and so the information that was provided to us, written in, and you heard tonight, would be subject of a different ordinance and a different public hearing. So, but that is something that we will be bringing to committee and talking about. With that, I want to read into the record, as Mr. Dumais said, letter dated June 9th, 2023, from Town Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval. Letter dated May 30th, 2023, from the Capital Region Council of Governments finding no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighborhood towns. And one more time, questions? Okay, I think we are, we will close this public hearing, and we are now ready for, yes. Okay, so this public hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much. And we will begin 7:10, ordinance amending certain requirements for accessory dwelling units. Roll call, Mr. David.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Councilor Cortez.
Here.
Councilor Fay.
Present.
Councilor McGinnis. Councilor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney. Here. Councilor Winograd. Councilor Zdanowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. We will begin with the presentation. Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this public hearing is continuation of our just previous discussion regarding Public Act 2129, and the impact on our local zoning ordinances, and this one relates to our ordinance amending certain requirements for accessory dwelling units. Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll turn it over to our town planner, Mr. Dumais, who can provide a summary of the brief changes to this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Todd Dumais, town planner for the record. Again, another ordinance correcting our current ordinance to make sure we're consistent with state statute. In this instance, the state's adopted a provision requiring municipalities, unless they opted out, to adopt accessory dwelling unit language more or less based on the model that the council adopted about a year before the state. So our local ordinance was used in large part to develop the state standard. However, as you can imagine, West Hartford does not represent everywhere in the state, so the state, as they adopted that language, did make some modifications, and we're here tonight just to correct the inconsistencies between the two. And it's really around 3 or 4 standards, the first of which our local ordinance set a maximum square footage of an accessory dwelling unit at 800 square feet. State standard is 1,000, so we have to allow larger accessory dwelling units. And then the next 2 standards were based on provisions where we could not impose or require more restrictive setbacks or coverage standards than the underlying zone that applied to the main house required. So the 2 changes there were, one stating that we can't require any more excessive coverage or more excessive side yard or front yard or rear yard setback requirement. And the last change of note was we had a provision that allowed for required exterior access to the dwelling unit. And this is also not allowed unless it's otherwise required by state fire or building code. So we eliminated that provision. And with those, we are in alignment and consistency with the state statute. The council was forward thinking and adopted this ordinance in 2021 in January. We've had 7 accessory dwelling units approved since that time. Of those 7, I went back and looked. One of them could have utilized the provisions of this ordinance had this ordinance been in place, and that was really pertaining to exterior door and access to the unit. The rest of them may have taken advantage of it if they wanted to build a larger accessory dwelling unit. I don't know. We only had 1 unit approach the 800 square foot maximum. So it's a fairly straightforward application. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council members might have.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for your work on all of these components and these hearings, but appreciate your work, and you did a wonderful job with our accessory dwelling units. And again, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Winograd, Councilor Winograd, who was really instrumental in bringing this across the finish line and making us be a leader, I think, for the state in this. So, do we have any public comments? And Mr. Clerk, have we received any written comments on this?
Madam Mayor, no written comments.
Thank you. And there is no one signed up to speak. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this public hearing? Okay, then we will go to questions from the council or any comments. Okay, Ms. Fay.
Thank you, Mayor. The way I understood the parking situation, the amendments that you want to make through the resolution, that it's a state mandate. Do I have that part right? That the state is making us do that unless we opt out through a laborious process like more hearings, et cetera, right? So that's a mandate. Okay. Is this one as well, or are we just looking to be more consistent with what the state's guidelines were, or is the state mandating that we do this these ADU changes? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Dumais or Mr. Dodge?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, under the state statute, which again, it was all part of the same public act that established both of these standards, there was an opt-out provision included that would have been the same process. Noticing something, having a public hearing, stating reasons on the record for why we were opting out of it.
And may I just a quick follow-up? With the max changing from 800 to 1,000, it's the greater of 30% or these, is that right? Wasn't it 30% of the house's square feet could be an ADU up to 800?
That's correct.
So it's still 30% though, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll make sure I understood it right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. All right. Anything else? Okay. Well, I would like to read into the record a letter dated June 9th, 2023 from Town Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval. Letter dated June 12th, 2023 from Capital Region Council of Governments finding no apparent conflict with regional plans, policies, or the concerns of neighboring towns. And one more check. All right. Again, thank you very much, Mr. Dumais. And with that, we are adjourned for this public hearing. And 7:20, I think we're there, right? Ordinance amending, I would like to start the public hearing. Bless you. Ordinance amending the application approval procedures for special use permits. Roll call, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Councilor Cortez.
Here.
Councilor Fay.
Here.
Councilor McGinnis. Councilor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney. Here. Councilor Winograd. Councilor Zdanowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. We will begin with presentation. Mr.
Thank you,
Ledbetter.
Madam Mayor. As stated, the purpose of this public hearing is to present the ordinance amending the application approval procedures for special use permits. This ordinance was also presented at the CPED meeting back in May and was amended based on feedback that we received from the town council at that meeting. Through you, Madam Mayor, I will ask our town planner, Mr. Dumais, to provide a summary of these changes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ledwith. Madam Mayor, members of the council, Todd Dumais, town planner for the record. The ordinance before you this evening, really the genesis of it is the request of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Perhaps the town clerk, Mr. Davidoff, will remember his days on the Planning and Zoning Commission. A lot of the work they handle with that's not wetlands related comes by the way of special use permit approvals. A special use permit is a type of use or class of use under our zoning that's deemed to be unique in character, and think of a church, place of worship, governmental facilities, golf courses that are generally located in residential zones. Because they're not a residential use, they're treated somewhat differently. To have a special use permit approved, you must go through a public hearing process to establish that use. Anytime that use is changed or amended, even very minor things, that same public hearing process has to occur. There's notice to neighbors, there's legal notices, a hearing process just like this. And it was the experience of the Planning Commission that we were receiving a number of very minor amendments, such as a small shed on a school, a shade structure on a playground at a school, a greenhouse at a church. We had 2 of those in the past 6 months. And all of those did not have an approval path other than going back through that same hearing process. So they asked staff, they begged staff to see if there was something else they could do. And fortunately there was, and it's something that the council has been comfortable with for a number of years now, and on a routine basis handles vis-a-vis an administrative approval process for special development district amendments. In fact, there's one on the agenda later this evening. So with that as a context, the ordinance was drafted and based on that same approval process, granting the town planner limited authority, and we actually dialed back the authority to approve very minor amendments to pre-existing special uses, and those were around accessory structures less than 250 square foot, additions to existing buildings of up to 500 square feet, or 10% of the existing square footage of the building, whichever's less, changes to the parking, either increase or decrease on-site parking by up to 5 spaces or 10%, whichever's less. And I could not impose or approve a change that would exceed the underlying standards in the zone. The way that this would operate would be I'd have to send notice to the Planning and Zoning Commission 10 days prior to one of their meetings. It would appear on their agenda. There'd be a sign posted on the property for the public to have notice. And at that meeting, the Planning Commission could overturn my recommendation for approval. And then if so, the application would have to go down the normal public hearing process. The last time this was presented at a CPED meeting, I think Councilor Poulin, there were some concerns the language as written wasn't very clear on process, and I agree. Corporation Counsel did a good job listening to that meeting and then I think correcting this to make it more clear and track the existing admin amendment process. So that's what the genesis of this ordinance does and seeks to do. With a little bit of history, we went back to 2012, and believe it or not, the Planning and Zoning Commission conducted 178 public hearings for special use permits. Looking at those and trying to analyze of those what could have been eligible and perhaps avoided a public hearing, and there was 30. And that's a fairly significant number when you think of the time and effort involved to have churches or schools or daycares engage with professional land use staff, attorneys, landscape architects, civil engineers to go through this process for a greenhouse or a shed. So I think there is merit in this ordinance, and I certainly support it on behalf of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dumais. I also just do want to give another thank you to Tiffany McGinnis, who chairs our CPED, and a lot of this has gone through CPED and discussions happened there. All the counselors and Ms. Poulin that you just heard, would weigh in and discuss and the ordinance is better now with clarification. So appreciate this. This makes a lot of sense. And we know not only is your office and staff so busy, but our volunteers at TPZ are extraordinarily overbooked and their meetings oftentimes go very, very late. And so if we can streamline the process reasonably, it seems to make a lot of sense. So I appreciate that very much. I would like to see if there's any public comments. And Mr. Clerk, have you had any written comments submitted?
Madam Mayor, no written comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Nobody has signed up. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to this public hearing? Okay, questions, comments from Town Council? No? Okay. Then I will read into the record, letter dated June 9, 2023 from Town Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval. Letter dated June 12, 2023 from Capital Region Council of Governments finding no apparent conflict with regional plans and policies or the concerns of neighboring towns. Mr. Dodge, are you staying for?
I'm about to walk out.
Oh, okay. All right. Any other? All right. All right. With nothing further, it looks like we can adjourn this public hearing, and we will begin the council meeting in, I guess, when everybody comes back in 5 minutes. Don't see a couple people, but I think we can get started. We will call the June 13th Town Council meeting to order, and we will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Roll call, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Councilor Cortez.
Here.
Councilor Fay.
Here.
Councilor McGinnis. Councilor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Here.
Councilor Winograd. Councilor Zdanowitz.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davidoff. This is a busy month of recognition and activity, so there's 4 proclamations that have been delivered that I just want to state for the record because they were often at events. So the first is and they're all important. First is Gun Violence Awareness Month proclamation. I'll just read these briefly. Whereas our country is facing a worsening epidemic of gun violence and death, and in 2021, Connecticut experienced 238 gun deaths, the highest toll in more than a decade. And whereas gun homicide in Connecticut disproportionately kills people of color, so much so that blacks and Hispanics accounted for 84% of 2021 gun homicides while accounting for less than 1/3 of the state's population. And whereas exposure to gun violence is a form of toxic stress that can change a child's brain development and lead to near-term and lifelong consequences, including decreased academic performance, chronic physical and behavioral health problems, substance abuse, unstable employment. And whereas more than 80% of child firearm suicides use a gun belonging to a family member, and 2/3 of school shooters obtain the firearm they used from their home or the home of a relative. And whereas guns have become the leading cause of death of U.S. children and teens since 2020, including the horrifying, gut-wrenching, and tragic mass shooting of 19 second-grade fourth grade students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. And whereas just several weeks ago our country witnessed the targeted buffalo. This is actually a little out of date because I had a different. Unfortunately, we see every week there's another mass shooting and many shootings that go unrecognized. Whereas beyond the intolerable loss of life and injury, gun violence costs Connecticut taxpayers $90 million annually, more than $430 million in direct costs, and $1.2 billion in societal costs. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize June 2nd as Gun Violence Awareness Day, and then the month of June as overall gun violence awareness in the town of West Hartford, and urge all elected leaders to have the courage and commitment to adopt common sense gun safety legislation to protect our communities across the country. The second is Pride Month proclamation, whereas the town of West Hartford supports the rights of every citizen to experience equality and freedom from discrimination, and whereas Pride Month is observed every June, celebrated each year to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising in Manhattan. As a result, this year's theme is #StandAgainstHate, and whereas all people, regardless of age, gender identity, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical challenges, have the right to be treated based on their intrinsic value as human beings. And whereas we as a society are learning, understanding, embracing, and including definitions of sexuality and gender, and recognize the education and awareness remain vital to end discrimination and prejudice. And whereas the town of West Hartford raised the pride flag representing light, healing, sun, calmness, art, and spirit in front of City Hall for the month of June, now therefore be proclaimed on behalf of myself that on June 23rd as Lesbian, Gay, Queer, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Month, I call upon our community to eliminate prejudice and bias everywhere and celebrate our diversity. And then upcoming very next week is Juneteenth, whereas the town of West Hartford remains committed to taking steps to acknowledge and reconcile the history of slavery in this town by recognizing the foundations that built this town included enslaved individuals, many of whom died without the title of a free person they so richly deserved, and by the continuing to strive and by continuing to strive for equity and justice through education, policy, and community engagement. Whereas we take this moment on June 19, 2023, to recognize the individuals who were enslaved in this town and across our nation, known as Juneteenth, which marks the day in 1865 that the last enslaved people of our country were informed of their freedom after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And whereas we affirm their freedom from the chains of invisibility and bondage and forever recognize their agency, human rights, and contribution to the town, and fully condemn the actions of those individuals who choose to enslave other human beings. And whereas the hard work and countless hours of effort to the Witness Dome West Hartford project, initiated in 2018 under the auspices of the Noah Webster House and West Hartford Historical Society, and the many students and community members of West Hartford who have dedicated their time, have helped to tell the individual stories of enslaved people, including the stories of Bristow and Dinah. And whereas the town of West Hartford is forever indebted to the individuals listed below, and recognizes that its foundation was built by the individuals that have been identified with witness stones and many others who died with their names yet to be discovered: Jude, George, Chris, Bristow, Prout, Page, Pompey, Ben, Caesar, Hannibal, Simone, Hercules, Dinah, Lyde, Jack, York, Lou, Kate, Caesar, Sarah, Kofi, Greenfield, Kofi, Ned, Reuben, Dinah, Boy, Infant, Sam, Neptune, Peter, Phoebe, Peleg Knott, Richard, Rachel Knott, Frank, Ransom, Chloe, Hagar, Bristow, Hagar, Lil, child of Lil, Silva, Ismael, child of Silva, Boy, Ambo, Plymouth, Prime, Titus, Thomas, and Julia Thomas. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize and commemorate Juneteenth in the town of West Hartford, and remember the enslaved individuals of this town and throughout our country, and remember those who were last informed of their freedom on June 19, 1865. And then the last proclamation that I have, we celebrated, and thank you so much to Ms. Blanks for being a leader in this celebration and also in this proclamation. Whereas National Caribbean American Heritage Month is the time we acknowledge the significant way Caribbean Americans have shaped our culture and heritage, whereas those with roots in the Caribbean have greatly enriched our society by contributing to the economic development, business, arts, healthcare, journalism, technology, government, religion, sports, music, education, and many other fields. And whereas during the month of June, we recognize the vibrant culture and patriotism of Caribbean Americans that continue to strengthen our country and enrich our communities. It is with this thought that we pay tribute to the strong alliances between the United States and the countries of the Caribbean. And whereas we acknowledge the Caribbean American men and women who are proud members of the military and those serving as first responders, medical professionals, and other essential personnel on the front line in the fight against coronavirus and other threats to public safety, our nation is safer, stronger, and healthier because of their services and sacrifices. And whereas we acknowledge the contribution of the migrant farm worker who travel here annually to work on the fields and farms, providing food, tobacco, and goods that contribute to the economy of our town and state. And whereas in 2004, an official campaign for June as National Caribbean American Heritage Month was launched upon the tabling of a bill in the U.S. Congress by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, with language provided by ICS founder and President Dr. Claire Nelson. A proclamation making the resolution official was signed by President George Bush on June 5, 2006. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby recognize June 3rd, 2023, now it's going to be already celebrated, as National Caribbean American Heritage Month, as we pay tribute to every Caribbean American for all they have done to improve and celebrate this town. And again, it was a wonderful celebration. And Carol, I don't know if you want to, Ms. Blanks, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, I just want to thank all those who came out, supported, and collaborated to make the event very successful. And we will begin to make this a national event for our town and hope that it only grows and become more inclusive. So thank you for all of those who supported and who attended.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. And we ended with a wonderful salsa lesson, and that was great. I also, in the reading these and just taking pause of what happened with the Black Lives Matter mural in Hartford, it is such a violation and a total disrespect and disregard for the human rights of individuals, and it just is really just a knife in the heart of so much of what was just said and what builds a community and what we are built on. And I just want to reach out and say our support is for the people in Hartford and everybody that was hurt by that horrible vandalism and really hateful hateful messages on that mural. So I just wanted to say that. Okay. We have public forum. So is there anybody signed up that would like to speak? I don't think so, because there's nobody in the audience, unless they're Casper on there. Okay. All right. So we can go to consent calendar for thank you. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, without objection, I move items 5A, 7B, 10A, 10B to be placed on the consent calendar.
Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, the items are placed on consent. Mr. Sweeney?
Madam Mayor, I move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now we go to unfinished business, 6A. Mr. Sweeney.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the ordinance establishing a sustainable West Hartford Commission.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. So this was the subject of a public hearing, and you'll hear this for the next 5 items. This has been in the works for a long time, was discussed in committee. Again, I want to thank Mr. Winograd for the committee chair that this was discussed in, and I want to also thank Catherine Deviney, who has been really a champion for the town to do this. And I think we will see some really incredible work that comes out of this commission. And I want to also thank all the volunteers that serve on the Clean Energy and the Conservation Commission that will form the new Sustainability Commission. And I look forward to working with them. And any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a comment, I spoke to this at the public hearing, but again, I do want to express thanks to the staff and the volunteers, especially Catherine Deviney, Bruce, and some of the others who have worked tirelessly in bringing this forward. So I'm just thankful to see that it has come to light and we are serious about putting our feet to the fire and just making these things that we discuss become actionable items.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks, and this will be effective September 1. So, all right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. B, Mr. Sweeney?
You need roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was the subject of a public hearing, so we have to do roll call. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Councilor Cortez.
Yes.
Councilor Fay.
Yes.
Councilor McGinnis is absent. Councilor Poland.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Yes.
Councilor Winograd is absent. Councilor Dzanowicz is absent. Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Sorry about that. B, Mr. Sweeney?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt an ordinance repealing the ordinance establishing the Conservation and Environment Commission.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This is just a byproduct of that change. So I don't think there's discussion, but all right. We will go to roll call. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Councilor Cortez.
Yes.
Councilor Fay.
Yes.
Councilor McGinnis is absent. Councilor Poland.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Yes.
Councilor Winograd is absent. Councilor Dzanowicz is absent. Passes 6-0.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. C, Mr. Sweeney?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion amending the multifamily residential parking requirements.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This was also subject of a public hearing to align with State Public Act 2129. Yes. And this will it actually just aligns the town's parking requirements better with the town's minimums. And we did receive public comment from the Pedestrian Bike Commission and a developer for us to look at some further modifications, or actually a pretty big modification, eliminating minimized parking, something that we did in the TOD, pretty close to that, and whether this is something that's right for West Hartford, we will discuss further, but we have the ability as the zoning approval body and STDs to lower parking requirements for those STDs as well. So that allows us some further flexibility right away. All right, any further discussion? Ms. Fay?
Yes. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. I have concerns about this, and I was really rather surprised not to see a lot of people come out for the public hearing, because I think I get as many letters about parking and problems and where to park and not enough spaces and things like that, and we heard that at the last public hearing on Steel Road, yet this is a major modification in my mind. I get concerned, I guess I'll just say this, whenever we have a state mandate that's forced on the towns where it takes away our flexibility, and we're seeing that happen more and more with when there's zoning that's coming down the pike. You just mentioned the ADUs. Now, I'm not against all of them. There's some that I will think that I think are pretty reasonable. Well, the reason I'm mostly concerned about the parking is because I heard Todd loud and clear about, he did his analysis in retrospect with the recent developments, but we've got some gigantic ones coming up, very, 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 very large. And I don't know, what the impact would be. So let's just say that we had the one on Park Road, the real big one by across from the Old Prospect Cafe. If we had lower minimums there, I guess I'm struggling with what's this going to look like with the big things that are coming on. So I think it might be a little bit premature, number one. Number two, I'd like to see an analysis, and I apologize that I didn't ask for this sooner, but of just some of these big ones with the less parking requirements and what that would look like. I know, the panacea for Connecticut is to become more public transportation reliable, and I agree with that. I'd like to see less cars. I'd love to give up my car, but the fact of the matter is, because Connecticut is a very car-centric state, I don't see that changing overnight. In fact, we're tapering back on some things like the train, which you just saw the article on. So I think this might be jumping the gun a little bit. I think in principle and philosophically, I'd love to see less parking. We certainly don't want to be Houston. We know what happens when that place gets hit with rain. It floods because there's too much blacktop. So I'm not advocating for lots of parking and, parking lots all over the place. The song, right? The song about the trees and the parking lots. I certainly don't like that. And then the other point that a developer made was about spurring development in West Hartford. We are very fortunate. We're a top community, and we all love living here, and developers want to come. So I don't know that we have to encourage them more right now, but I would be open-minded to a circumstance where the environment changes and we have to do something to encourage more development, but I don't think we're there right now. So I think it's a little early, and I am concerned about less now without, we're kind of bringing the horse before the cart. We don't have the public transportation that we need to have less cars, and I just worry about the big developments. So with that, I will pause.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Cortez, did you have?
Yeah, so to echo some of Ms. Fay's comments, yes, this is concerning when we're talking about, one of the things mentioned was right size, the parking situation. And, right size doesn't mean reduce, and there's one size doesn't fit all. When we look at this, so when you look at it, what the state is doing at a state level, and you look at West Hartford as a community, certain areas we have, when you go to right size, you need more. not less. You look at Farmington Avenue, and landlords are just telling their tenants, park wherever you park on the street, you're fine, it's okay. But yet we have an ordinance stating that you can't park between two to 5. So my concern is that once we start adding other developments, are we going to create issues that like we have already, similar to Farmington, as we start developing on the north side of town, and you're looking at the Yukon property. What does that look like when you put an ordinance like this in place? What of an impact does it have on neighbors or businesses? You have right now with the way it sits currently, right? You have the property on Berkshire Road, new development, and they don't have quite enough parking. They're struggling. They're cutting it very close. So who is that going to impact? When they run out of space, where are these cars going to go? Are they going to go across the street to a church that has a preschool and, cut through the back? And so again, what does that look like? Is this a knee-jerk reaction? I like that. Right now, the way everything stands, and we have the STDs in place and stuff like that, we have the TOD, and there's reduced parking because it makes sense there. But some of this doesn't make sense in other areas, so I have concerns with this, and especially with all the activity we have in town. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all issue, and I don't think we're ready yet, especially when we have parking issues that we should be discussing, as far as do we do permits for the areas that have parking problems and actually allow certain areas to park overnight. So there's so much other stuff with parking that we should that we need to address. So it's hard for me to support this without addressing those other issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez. Any other comments? Nope. All right, then we will go to a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Councilor Cortez.
No.
Councilor Fay.
No.
Councilor McGinnis is absent. Councilor Poland.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Yes.
Councilor Winograd is absent. Councilor Zdanowitz is absent. Motion carries 4-2.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. We will go to letter D. Mr. Sweeney.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, make a motion to adopt, make a motion amending certain requirements for accessory dwelling units.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This was also the subject of a public hearing, aligning with the state adopted an accessory dwelling unit ordinance after, or regulate, what do you call it? Would it be legislation? Sorry.
Yep.
And about a year, 2 years almost after us. So we are pretty consistent, but there were a few minor things that were adjusted to amended or suggested amended to align with the state. So we will go to, is there any discussion? Mr. Cortez?
So these are one of the things where you took it wrong and you made it right. I've always questioned that 800 square feet max, and and I get the purpose of the accessible dwelling unit, but until you've been in 800 square feet, and it just, to me, never made sense. I kind of scratched my head on where, why we capped that number. So, I'm glad to see that we righted it wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez. Ms. Fay?
Yeah, this is one where I want to demonstrate that we really are thoughtful about these things. I don't like the mandate fact of this either. I just don't like mandates where our hands can be tied sometimes, but this is reasonable. So I do see the need for ADUs, especially with our inflation and our economy right now, and being consistent, I think, makes a lot of sense. I also like that we did keep, or the state did, the max of 30% of the original dwelling. I think that's helpful for balance, so you don't have these monstrosities. You could foresee a little house with a big, huge ADU, which might not be good. Might be crowding the lot. So I do like that. So like Alberto, I'm going to support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to give a thank you to Mr. Winograd, who's not here, who was a real advocate for this, a champion for ADUs. And what I find interesting, I also thought the 800 was a little small. But I think what we saw from what has come from the 7 approvals, there was one that might be have been at that been interested in a little bit more, but most were not. So that 30% really seemed to work well. So it'll be interesting to see 7 homes that have been built because of this ordinance. So that's really cool. Any other comments? All right, we'll go to roll call.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Councilor Cortez.
Yes.
Councilor Fay.
Yes.
Councilor McGinnis is absent. Councilor Poland.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Yes.
Councilor Winograd is absent. Councilor Zdanowitz is absent. Passes 6-0.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Sweeney.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the application and approval process for special use permits.
Second.
Motion's been made and second, again, subject to a public hearing, aligning and kind of with our zoning approval, administrative amendments approvals that we do, takes it away from, it allows our town planner to do more administrative work. And so this is consistent with that. And is there any comments or discussion? Okay, Ms. Fay.
You know, the advantage of being a top community is we do have a lot of work coming in, and I think anything that we can do to streamline work makes a lot of sense. And what I really like about this proposal the most, I think Todd's outstanding. He does a great job as our planning director, but this has a check and balance, so it still has to go before the P&Z committee, and they can override the suggestion that's approved. So I think it's got both the speed and velocity that we need to make things more efficient, but it's also got that check and balance. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Any other comments? All right, we go to roll call. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilor Blanks.
Yes.
Mayor Cantor.
Yes.
Councilor Cortez.
Yes.
Councilor Fay.
Yes.
Councilor McGinnis is absent. Councilor Poland.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney. Councilor Winograd is absent. Councilor Zdanowitz is absent. Passes 6-0.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. 7A, Mr. Sweeney.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to adopt a resolution approving programs eligible for Neighborhood Assistance Act tax credit program.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. This was also the subject of a public hearing, as something that we do every year, where nonprofits present a plans, approved projects for donation by businesses, and as Councilor Poulin pointed out, even though they might have multiple projects that cap out at $150,000 or more, they are limited with all projects to the $150,000 limit according to our tax code. So that is any just further discussion? All right, this is a great way for our community to contribute to nonprofits and help them in ways that they identified they needed help. Thank you to Ms. Rubina Turco for being here and going through this with us. So we can go to a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so now we go to the reports from the town manager, Mr. Ledwith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll begin my town manager's report with a summary of upcoming council business and meetings. We have our rescheduled Human and Community Services meeting, which will take place on Thursday, June 15th at 5 p.m. That will be a virtual meeting. And then we have our Community Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting, which will take place next Wednesday, the 21st, June 21st at 8 a.m., and that will be a virtual meeting. I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to everyone involved in the planning and execution of this past weekend's Celebrate West Hartford event. The weather could not have been nicer as we welcomed tens of thousands of residents and visitors who walked our immaculate grounds of Town Hall. This event does not happen without the extraordinary commitment and dedication of a large number of employees and volunteers leading up to the event and then spending their entire weekend on site ensuring that the event runs smoothly for everyone. A very special thanks to Linda Geisler and Rebecca Holmes and our leisure services staff for their efforts in coordinating this memorable event. our police and fire departments for their visible presence throughout the weekend, ensuring a safe environment for all, our public works and plant facilities staff helping to maintain operations, and then our community development, risk management, public relations, tax office, fire marshal's office, and information technology for all of their behind-the-scenes work. Of course, this event does not happen without all of our volunteers. A special thank you to our Celebrate West Hartford Committee, the Road Race Committee, Celebrate volunteers, and our Community Emergency Response Team. Their stewardship of our community's spirit and pride is deeply appreciated. Everyone's hard work and commitment has undoubtedly left a lasting impression on all who attended, making this year's an event one to remember. And then finally, I do just want to take a moment to express my gratitude to Rosina Haskins, whose last day as Executive Director of Equity Advancement is this Friday, as she moves out to Illinois to become a Deputy Superintendent. It's been an honor to have worked with Rosina and learned from her every day for the last 16 years. Rosina worked tirelessly to advance equity for students, colleagues, and families, and her legacy will be felt for years to come through her work to establish our Equity and Diversity Council, our vision for equity and anti-racism, and of course our educational equity policy. I will miss Rosina's mentorship, leadership, and friendship, and wish her and her husband Jeff nothing but health and happiness in the future. They will be missed. So thank you.
Is that it? You're done.
That is it. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council has.
I didn't know if you had.
On any business.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the town manager? All right, we go to Corporation Counsel. Mr. Dodge, any?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no formal report, and I'm pleased to say that we do not require an executive session this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Any questions for Corporation Counsel? Okay. Announcements. As we speak, it will be, well, it's over now, but Gertrude Blank's storytelling event was tonight at First Church in West Hartford. I just want to thank Andre Keat, Mike Keogh, and Karen Prescott for sharing their stories. I don't know if this was filmed, but I'm sure it will be would be a very interesting and engaging event. It's a busy night in West Hartford for sure. So I also tonight was I don't know if anyone has watched the show, The Jewish Matchmaker. It's really a good show, but the woman from the show was actually here tonight as well. Anyway, Juneteenth. Join us for a day filled with inspirational messages, art, music, art, and activities for all ages. Come to West Hartford's 3rd annual Juneteenth Community Celebration on Saturday, June 17th. Blueback Square from 11 to 4. Symphony Privet, Fox 61 News anchor and reporter, will MC the celebration. The event features Nikita Waller, Connecticut State Troubadour, Deji B.E.Z., Lisa Clayton, and Voices of Freedom Gospel Choir, Studio 860 Dance Team, and Little Skits. The official event sponsor is the Connecticut Historical Society. It will really be a great day. West Hartford Pride takes place on Saturday, June 24th, with a rally at 11 a.m. in the front steps of Town Hall Auditorium, followed by a festival at 12 p.m. in the Town Hall parking lot featuring vendors, food trucks, kids' activities, performances, and drag artists. The event culminates at 6 p.m. with the tea dance at center stage. This will be the biggest West Hartford Pride event ever. Hope to see you there. More information, visit westhartfordpride.org, which is now a nonprofit 501c3. Camp Blueback, weekly series event for children, will be held every Tuesday starting June 20th at 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in Blueback Square outside Barnes & Noble. The event is free, face painting, crafts, and more, and it runs through August 22nd. And the West Hartford Art League Fun Fridays in July. This summer camp offers 1-week sessions for students entering grades kindergarten through high school. Complete schedule of the programs can be found on the Art League's website. You can also register for Fun Fridays. West Hartford Art League is also offering Fun Fridays in July as part of their summer camp experience. Performances will be held on Fridays after the completion of the morning schedule of camp for students entering K through 5. And these announcements, obviously, with Juneteenth and Pride and Celebrate, there's an enormous amount of effort that goes in by the volunteer organizations that put those on, but also by, as Mr. Ledwith shared, staff and so much public safety concern and our officers. See a couple officers in the back. Thank you for all you do to keep our community safe. And when we are bringing in thousands and thousands of visitors into town, it is a real it's a real effort and a real priority for the community. So thank you to all that you do. We appreciate it very much. And Mr. Ledwith, thank you for your leadership and making all of this work seamlessly to the outside. So, but again, so much goes on. Mr. Sweeney.
Just to add on to that, a friend of mine who I used to work with was an alderman in New Haven, Daryl Brackeen, is going to be speaking at First Church and also talking about his book, but we'll be kicking off the festivities for Juneteenth at First Church, and he's a fantastic speaker, and unfortunately, I will not be able to be there, but it's great to have someone from New Haven up here in West Hartford. So.
And what time will that be?
That will be at 10 a.m. at First Church, and then he will also have his book that he wrote on America's First Black Congressman. So he is. This is the second author of a friend of mine who's come here to town. So this is pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing it, and looking forward to seeing all of the festivities we have this weekend.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney. Any Ms. Pullen?
Yes, two, if that's okay, through you, Madam Mayor. Just first, congratulations to all the high school graduates. We're having Conard and high school graduations this evening, so congrats to them and their families as well, and to all the teachers and staff who made it through this year, which I understand was a pretty difficult year. But I also wanted to announce for the public that our outdoor pools are opening this weekend on Saturday, so come take a look at our pools and cool off and enjoy what we have to offer.
Thank you, Ms. Pullen. Ms. Pullen chairs our Human and Leisure Services, and it's always a bit of a excitement and focus to make sure that we are ready for summer, and that's great to share. And I also want to congratulate the graduates. And again, this is looking back 4 years generationally of any experience that any students have had for 3 to 4 years. It's really been a challenge for sure. So, but you've done it, and we're so proud of you. And congratulations to your families, Mr. Cortez.
So I want to thank everybody that participated in the diaper drive at West Hartford United Methodist Church, which helps the town of cares here in West Hartford, and that wrapped up in May, and now we begin the food drive, which would go from June to Labor Day, just unexpired, non-perishable foods. There's a drop box in the front. Again, makes it easy for people that can't make it over here, and it's accessible after hours. But also, if you're a crafter, we have the Pumpkin Festival, and that is October 21st from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Just email whumc1959@gmail.com and let Alberto Cortez know that you're interested in being a vendor, and I'll get you all the information that you would require for that day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez, and you and the church have done so much good work to support people in need, and the food drive that you're doing is coming at such an important time. A lot of people think of our holidays as being the neediest time for food, but it actually is the summer months when school isn't in session that families feel that need more acutely. So thank you for that. Appreciate it very much. All right. Anything else? Okay. Then I'd like to, Mr. Sweeney, go to 12A.
Oh, Madam Mayor, without objection, I move to adjourn.
Any objection? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Have a good night, and again, congratulations.